Like many other North Carolina college graduates, Greensboro debutante and Carolina grad Jane Borden made her way to New York City. And in her new book, I Totally Meant to Do That, she tries to explain why she still calls North Carolina home and still loves it, but she stayed in New York for a long time. And here's what she says. She said she got addicted to the city. Well, maybe Jane Borden can explain that concept a little bit more to us when she is our guest on North Carolina Bookwatch next.
Funding for North Carolina Bookwatch is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV, and by the North Carolina Humanities Council.
Welcome to North Carolina Bookwatch. I'm D.G. Martin. My guest is Jane Borden. She's the author of I Totally Meant to Do That, which is a new book talking about her experiences in New York City. North Carolina girl in New York City. Jane Borden, welcome.
Thanks.
Well, you grew up in Greensboro.
I did.
But you've got kin folks all across North Carolina.
All across the state.
And after you graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, like many other young North Carolinians, you headed to New York City. Different from many, you stayed, but you found that living in New York City was not all that happy and easy, but you didn't come back home because, as you say in your book, you're addicted to the city. If New York is such a hard place, hard on people who live there, how do you get addicted to it?
Well, I think the rewards outweigh the risks. It is a hard place to live, but it's also very invigorating. And when you're in it, you don't notice the negative aspects, or you don't notice the tolls it's taking on you. And that's part of the reason why I did make the analogy with addiction, because I think when someone's addicted to something, they only see the rewards, they don't see the detriments. And I still love New York. I don't mean to say that it's like a horrible drug or something that destroys lives. It doesn't. But I began to recognize that my relationship with it, that I had blinders on when I viewed the city, and that it was, in fact, wearing me out a little bit. And that happened to happen, or that coincided with a time in my life when I began to feel the tug of my roots.
So you're tugged to North Carolina, but you're stuck in New York City because there's so many things that you've become attached to that you like.
One of the things I became attached to in New York City is the anonymity that it allows. And I think I was particularly attracted to that because I had come from the South, and, you know, as you mentioned, cousins across the state. And one of my favorite things about North Carolina is that we all know each other. And you know, I did this thing when I was 15 called the Western Tour with 80 other 15-year-old kids from the state. So I mean, you really just know everybody, and my parents and all their friends everywhere, and going places and saying, "Oh, you're Vicky and Bob's daughter," and you know, all of that. And then you go to New York, and suddenly you're just one person among 8 million, and not only does no one know who you are, but they don't care.
Well, now a lot of people would say, I mean, a lot of people growing up in North Carolina, where we are surrounded by people who know us, who keep an eye on us. I mean,
exactly.
You've got this story about I'm watching you, or I'm looking at you. I'm
studying.
Studying you.
Yep.
You've got people studying you all over, and for some people, the ability to be anonymous in a big place where nobody really knows or cares is invigorating and liberating. For some of the rest of us, it's just a killer. And how did you react to that experience?
My first reaction to it was that I loved it. I loved, excuse me, being able to it wasn't even that I wanted to, you know, practice bad behavior or something and not get caught. It was just that it was just this liberating feeling of walking around completely anonymous. And the story you mentioned was "I ain't studying you" was a phrase that my father, growing up, they had a cook, and my father and his siblings were always getting into trouble and trying to distract her and annoy her, essentially. And her way of diffusing their antics was to just say, I ain't studying you. You know, like, do what you like, you're not going to get a rise out of me. And that's how I felt New York was a little bit, and it was very freeing. But then after about 10 years in the city, I started to think, wow, all these years I've said how much I love that no one here cares about me. And then I thought, that's terrible. Nobody cares about me. And I came to appreciate and understand what a wonderful thing it is in the South, that everybody does, as you said, looks out for you and takes care of you, and came to appreciate that in a different way. And I think for me, New York was that time in the woods. Well, you know, that rite of passage.
Well, in your book, I totally meant to do that. You've got lots of stories about your, I mean, it's a collection of essays about your encounters with people in New York. And I'm not sure where we ought to go with it, but one of the interesting things, and I think it'll be interesting for our North Carolina viewers, is the other North Carolina people who make their way to New York, particularly the young people. And you have a way of describing them in terms of kind of analogies to fraternities. And how do young North Carolinians do in New York City?
Well, as you said, so many go. And I never understood why people in New York would go, North Carolina, how'd you wind up here? And I wanted to say, you can't believe how many of us are here. But they just don't stay very long, and they frequently will go back home after a couple of years. And I think a lot of the times they don't really like New York that much. They love it for a couple of years, but then they want to be home. And for me, that period was just elongated for 12 years. But I hypothesize in one of the chapters in the books that part of the reason why they don't find a way to enjoy New York more is because maybe they don't engage more with the city. And the North Carolinians in New York can sometimes tend to stick together, and that's not always the case. But and so my first few years in New York, I would have, you know, my Southern friends who were always with each other in their apartment. We treated it just like the Fidel House out on campus here at Chapel Hill. And then I would have this other group of friends who were all from, you know, New Jersey. And I loved having all the different satellites, people who kind of banded together. You liked being in touch with your base, and then liked your new friends as well. Well, what I love the story, the concept that you developed about how North Carolina people kind of come to live with each other, and that they have these apartments that are rented and full of North Carolina boys, and then somebody leaves and they will a place to another. They will the room down to another graduating senior who's coming up. Yeah, exactly. So that these people you're saying that don't really necessarily engage in New York, they keep their North Carolina connections and just happen to be in New York, but they're really of North Carolina. But sometimes that's the case, and yeah, and again, not always, but yeah, I think a lot of people who come up to New York from anywhere, for that matter. I mean, I'm sure that happens with kids from, you know, Kansas, although there really aren't that many Kansas people in New York. But I just think that's a tendency to kind of band together, and I didn't understand why. Why would you spend all that money to be living in New York and not experience it? But one thing that has been interesting, you mentioned that there are a lot of stories about the New Yorkers in the book, but I've been asking people, what were your favorite stories or what were your favorite characters to read about? And people from New York have always said that they're most interested in the Southern characters and the stories about the South. And people from the South have also said that. Yes. Well, but there are a lot of great characters, Southern characters, and of course, your Aunt Jane. Yes. Is the maybe the other than yourself is the lead character, and you and your Aunt Jane are not the only Janes in your extended family. There are a lot of Janes. But tell us how Aunt Jane happened to become the lead character in your book, or a lead character. Well, a combination of things. One, she was the person who was always reaching out to me when I was in New York, you know, either literally begging me to come home or, you know, subtly reminding me where I come from and who I am, and sometimes less subtly, like, for example, when she sent me the Manners book with passages highlighted, tips that she thought might apply to my life in New York. But
now, don't leave that story so quickly, because that's
well, that's I can get back to that. But,
okay. Let's just leave the other and talk about the story that you tell so well in your book about Aunt Jane sending you the Book of Manners, and you said she underlined some passages.
Yes.
And then did some of your friends happen to?
Well, but she was sending me packages a lot. And she would have to send them to my office in Manhattan because I didn't have a doorman in my building. I've never had a doorman in my building.
So the mail would get stolen if she sent it.
Well, packages. I mean, you just have a slot. Mm-hmm. So anything larger than an envelope would have to go to my office.
All right. So it comes to your office where your friends can see your mail.
Yes, and she knew that would happen, and she had asked me not to open it at work, and I didn't know why. I just thought that was kind of a silly request. So, of course, I opened it at work, and another reason I opened it at work is because all of my friends were standing around the desk going, "You got another package from your aunt. Please, can we see what's in it?" Because they had really come to appreciate the things that she sends me, bags of eyeshadows or lots of slips.
Some slips.
Yes.
Because
a paisley print shower cap, lots of things that she thinks.
And so your aunt is seriously worried about you and sending things that she thinks will keep you sort of on track as a good Southern young woman, and your friends are laughing at her.
Yes.
And laughing at you for getting these. Now, what about the manners book? Why did they laugh so hard at that?
Because she sent me a manners book.
But did they react in particular to any of the advice that she underlined?
People in New York do not understand manners in general or etiquette.
What do you mean by that?
It's just not a way that people behave in New York. They consider it an extra and unnecessary step that impedes productivity. That's the best way I can explain it. Manners are seen also sometimes as an affectation, and so then people become suspicious if you're being overly chivalrous or something. People will go, "What are you trying to
How are you trying to take advantage of me?"
Yes, exactly. They're very suspicious of manners. Or at best, they just think they're kind of useless. So this idea of someone in the modern day, just seeing this book in front of them, and it was highlighted in hot pink. And
all right, well, now what? All right, now you've conveyed to us that your friends got a big kick out of the manners book coming from Aunt Jane, and you love your Aunt Jane, and so you're appreciative of this, but you understand why your friends are laughing at you.
Well, I love my Aunt Jane. I won't say that I was appreciative of the book. I think at the time I was much more argumentative. I'm still rather argumentative, but I've become more accepting of.
Well, was there an underlined piece of advice that solicited the most, or that evoked the most laughter from your friends, or that you remember? Or was there anything?
Well,
did you even look at that book?
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I sat and wrote an open letter to the author, arguing with each point within it. My favorite piece of advice was that when you're walking down and when you're entering an aisle of seats in the theater or something, you should always face the people you're squeezing past, so that you don't force them to look at your backside. Which doesn't make any sense, because then you're forcing them to look at your front side, and there's no
so you
good
wrote
way to.
Did you really write the author?
Oh, it's in the book.
But you wrote it to us,
yes,
your readers.
It's an
she
open letter.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And she may see it when she reads your book.
She may or may not see it. That's right.
Well, great about Aunt Jane, and what a wonderful woman who also read your book and said it's okay to go forward.
She
with
did.
these
I let her read it first.
But your mom is also an important character in this book, and I think one of the things that I think many people in North Carolina will understand is when you get to be your age, college graduate, your parents start thinking about family things that they don't know what they're going to do with when they die, and so they start wanting to parcel out to their children. All of us are at that stage. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there are things that the children don't want. Sometimes they're treasures. Now you had a particular.
I wasn't allowed to get mine. They had to stay in a box in the basement.
Well, now go through that. So what did your mama give you, and then what did she take back?
Well, the one item that I highlight the most was one Christmas she gave me this beautiful heron dish. It's about this big and it's shaped like a leaf, and it's beautiful. And excited. It took me a while to grow into enjoying nice things, and I was just at that stage. This was several years ago. And I said, I love it, it's beautiful. And she said, I'm so glad. Now wrap it up and hand it back. And
what was she thinking of?
Because she puts it in the box in the basement with all the other things that she's given me, but that I can't have yet because they're not allowed to go to New York.
Now, what is your mama thinking about? What is going through her mind, and what's going through your mind when you get this news? Or do you maybe you say, well, you're right. I live in a dangerous place.
Well, what my mother says is that she's afraid they'll break in New York, or I'll lose it, or something will happen to it. But I think subconsciously, what's going on is that these items, like her daughter, are supposed to be in the South, and at some point, I will come home. And then they'll be there for me when I get there.
But not while you're up there.
But not while I'm up there. And I'll tell you, this is one of the items in the book that I get the most. People have been very kind to find my email address or find me on Facebook and tell me they've read the book. And that's the chapter most frequently noted, is people will say, my mother does the exact same thing. Yeah. People who are also, have also left home for somewhere else.
Well, there was, honestly, wouldn't you have to say there's good reason? You describe in your book, in another chapter, about some of the drug addicts and thieves who happen to live in your building.
But in New York, we have deadbolts, double locks, bars on the windows, and in the South, sometimes people don't even lock their doors.
Well, where would you be more likely to have it, have your treasure taken?
I think in Greensboro. Or it could just get lost. I asked my mother if, now that I've just gotten married and we're going to have a home and it's in the South, and Mom is so thrilled. And I said, well, can I have all my things now, including some of the jewelry, which is not in the box in the basement. She keeps those upstairs in all her special hiding places. And she said, well, of course, but you already have the Jane ring. And I said, no, I don't. You have the Jane ring. And she goes, oh, well, I don't. Yes. She has no idea where it is.
So well, I didn't, you're getting me off track. But we just got to go, in our debate about whether or not it's safer behind unlocked doors in the South or behind triple deadbolts in New York City. You tell the story of the gypsies in Greensboro, and why are you telling that story? But it's a great story. Why would the gypsies, are the gypsies real, and would they really put your mama's jewelry at risk?
Part of what's
tell us the story of the
part of what's fun to me about the gypsies is that I have no idea if they're real or not. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors and mystery surrounding them, which made them very exciting to me as a child.
What did you hear? What did people say?
Well, who knows? I mean, gypsies, that's a derogatory word, which I didn't even know until I was older. And I think most of the people in North Carolina who know these thieves and refer to them as gypsies also don't know that's insulting. But it's basically just a band of thieves, and no one knows who they are or where they come from.
But they come to Greensboro.
They come through Greensboro.
And what do they do?
Once a year, twice a year, I think, and only go into doors that are unlocked, presumably because then it's not breaking and entering if they get caught. And they wait for you to be in the shower or in the garden. They kind of watch, and then they'll go in with two people, and one person will be the lookout, and the other person is taking all your silver.
And is
the
that a
silver
myth,
is what
or
they want.
Is that a myth, or is that real?
Well, it gets a little muddy, and I think some of the stories have been mythologized and exaggerated, and one of the things I write about in the book is one specific incident that got twisted through the telephone wires, but they did get caught once. And so that we do have some cold, hard facts about it, and I interviewed the man who was their court-appointed lawyer.
Well, this is Locke Clifford, who's a great lawyer in North Carolina.
He is.
What
He's
did
wonderful.
What did he tell you about all this?
Well, he told me the story about the flying saucers, and when he said, "You want to hear about the flying saucers?" And I said, "The what?" And I kind of wondered, exactly how foreign do North Carolinians think these people are? But then what he explained to me is that they had been caught, and there were a lot of them. They got the license plate as the van was driving off, and an APB went out. So when the cops tracked him down, there were two vans full of people. And so the cop couldn't, he made them follow each other. Well, he followed them, but of course they split because there was only one cop car. So the cop had to pick which van to follow, and then the van that was being pursued further tried to discombobulate him by throwing the silver out the windows at the car. Well, the silver is lots of trays and bowls, and so it looked like flying saucers. So they began to refer to it at the police house as the flying saucer incident.
Well, I'm glad I got off track, but I did get off track. And I've got several more stories I want you to share with us from your book. And getting back to a concept that we talked about earlier, and that is that you're able to be sort of anonymous in New York. And you tell the story, could be a movie, about your encounter on the dance floor with somebody that in one version of it you could fall in love with, but it didn't work out that way. Can you tell us, I mean, what the story, what it means?
I was at this bar on the Upper East Side, and I was kind of ho-humming and not really having a good time, and I was standing by the dance floor, and the DJ started playing that song from Grease, and I kind of rolled my eyes, you know, of course, whatever. And then this guy across the dance floor kind of realized he was looking at me, and we just slowly started dancing in sync, and it became this elaborate, you know, we were playing a game, we were having fun, and it wasn't, you know, I didn't think he was hitting on me, and I don't know if he was or not, but we were just kind of going through this fun dance, and it got really synchronized, and then at the end, and I knew about 5 seconds
So y'all
before,
are really dancing.
We're really dancing.
Like in Greece.
Like in Greece with the guns and the, yeah. And I knew about 5 seconds before it happened that he was going to kiss me, that there was going to be a dip. I just knew that was going to be part of the choreography. And we kissed, but like I said, it didn't feel as if this was leading.
So wonderful dance together, y'all are in sync, a kiss, and now you're going to live together the rest of your lives. What happened?
Instead, we just kind of bowed and curtsied to each other and walked away.
And you never saw him again?
And I never saw him again, and I didn't want to, and we didn't speak. And it wasn't about the kiss. It was just about this fun encounter with a stranger. And I realized that that's one of the things I love about New York is all these strangers, and you can have all these encounters and make out with all of them. No, I'm just kidding.
Whoa.
But that you can have all these little individual moments with people that you'll never see again, and that's okay, and there's something great in that.
So you're just very comfortable. I mean, some of us would say, oh my golly, that's so tragic that they never got to be friends again. Just have this experience, walk away from it, and everybo's happy. And what's the moral of that story?
The moral of that story is don't judge a book by its cover, because I ended up having a great time at that terrible bar. And the other moral of the story is that anonymity is nice, it's fun, and it's good to have experiences with people that you've never met and that you might not ever meet again, and also that you can't capture everything and tack it into a butterfly box. You know, you can't, every funny laugh you share with a person on the street, you can't stop and say, what's your contact information, or can I take a picture of you? You have to just, these moments just happen, and that's what New York is, just a series of those moments. That's one of the things I love about it.
Well, the hardest question for me to ask you after all of this is, do Southerners still hate Yankees? And how do Yankees feel about Southerners?
Oh gosh, they just don't understand each other is the problem, because if you listen to the criticisms they have of one another, they're never right, you know? Well, for example, the manners thing, you know, Southerners think New Yorkers are so rude and crude because they don't exhibit all of these manners that we are seeped in.
You said that today.
But you know, as I tried to explain, the reasons why New Yorkers don't use manners, it's not because they're rude and crude, it's just because they don't have as much of a use for them because the culture's different, doesn't require it. New Yorkers think that Southerners are fake because the manners, you know, I'm just using this one example with manners, they think it's fake or affected, or, you know, there's ulterior motives, again, because they don't understand. So everybody's just got to get over themselves.
Well, you didn't answer my, do Southerners, did you find that Southerners hate?
Well, this is part of the reason why I stopped telling people I was from the South, because just the needling and the joke, this is the thing that people, I think this is the funniest and also the most offensive response. When I say I'm Southern, they go, oh, do you miss your slaves?
That's the,
I mean,
and what do you say?
It's hilarious because it's so ridiculous, but it's I just kind of go, whatever. But I just stopped telling people.
Well, are
because,
Southerners also unfair to,
Yes.
And how so?
Well, you know, I mean, they just said Yankees and make fun of the accents, and they think people up there have no culture, which is ridiculous. I don't know why. I guess it's just good old-fashioned xenophobia.
Well, we're almost out of time, and as you mentioned earlier, you've gotten married, and you're going to come back to the South.
That's right.
Are you missing New York already, even though you haven't quite
Yes.
already left?
No. Yes. I'm going through. I'm
Is it
revisiting a lot
withdrawal?
of
Is it
the-
withdrawal,
well,
like from your addiction to New York?
It probably will be. Yes. I imagine there will be lots of symptoms of withdrawal, but I'm also excited for the change, and I'm ready for it. And I loved and love New York, but it's time for me to start a new chapter.
Great stories, and
Well,
great
thanks.
stories for those of us who've watched our children go to New York and our friends and have this experience told in a delightful way. It's a wonderful book and wonderful
Thank you.
stories. Best of luck to Jane Borden as she enters a new phase of her life, and thanks to all of you all for joining us as we discussed Jane Borden's new book, I Totally Meant to Do That. Thanks for being with us, and I hope that you'll join me same time next week, and I'll introduce you to another one of North Carolina's great writers. See you then.
Funding for North Carolina Bookwatch is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV, and by the North Carolina Humanities Council.